As a small island in the North Atlantic Ocean, Ireland is defined by the sea. A country with over 7,000 kilometres of coastline dotted by dozens of ports, which for much of our history were our only connection to the outside world. And although Ireland might be a small island, in reality we're a large nation with ocean territories 7 times the size of our land area. Territories that are rich in food, minerals and energy. But despite this vast wealth of marine resources, we've never had a national plan for how we use them. At least, not until now. A new national plan is laying the framework for the future use of our oceans. But with overfishing and climate change already threatening our seas, is this the opportunity to create a new ocean economy, one in harmony with the natural world? Or are we planning to repeat the same mistakes seen on land, only this time on a much larger scale? Despite the importance of our ocean resources, there's never been an overarching plan to manage the marine environment. And there's a lot to plan for. Ireland has 500,000 kilometres squared of ocean territory, making us one of the largest nations in Europe. This vast area stretches from the west of France to the south of Iceland, territories that are rich in fisheries, energy, minerals and wildlife. And for 90 years, the only legislation governing marine activity was the 1933 Foreshore Act. But with the challenges we face today, there is clearly a need for a new strategy, more in keeping with the times we live in. As an ecologist, I'm interested to explore if the new legislation goes far enough to protect the health of our oceans. And there's so much we still don't know about life in the sea. So to begin, I want to learn a little more about one of the most misunderstood and yet common animals in Irish waters: sharks. With only days left in the season, I'm joining a team of researchers in their search for sharks off the west coast.
Nick, you've been studying sharks for a long time. What is it that you find so fascinating about sharks?
It's a combination of excitement, seeing the animals, the wonder at their physiology and behaviour, and then the importance that they play. So
you must know everything about them.
My feeling is that the more we study these animals, the more we realise we don't know about them, and the more surprises that come up. Anything that we try to do to try to improve the situation for these animals overwhelmingly relies on, is totally underpinned by good understanding of their biology and their ecology. And for so many of these species, even the ones that we think we know the most about, like the most basic things, like we don't know how old these animals are. What attracts them to different places? Like why so many of these species? Why is Ireland such an important place for them? Why do basking sharks come here every year? We don't know. And those are the kind of things that it's so important that we try to answer those questions as best we can, because they will ultimately feed into the most effective conservation measures. The more we know, the more we'll be able to help them.
This is cutting-edge science. But tagging a shark still relies on some older techniques: bait, a line, and patience.
Lucy, what are you hoping to catch today?
So today we're out fishing for porbeagle sharks. So they're in the same family as the white shark. They'd be a little bit smaller. But what's really interesting about the porbeagle sharks is they're part of this small group of about 33 species that can warm part of their body. So not all fish are cold-blooded, and these are one of those species that can warm their muscle. Porbeagles are classed as a critically endangered species.
And what is it that's threatening them?
The largest one would be commercial fisheries. So getting caught in nets or getting caught as bycatch. So that's why our research also wants to kind of look at what is happening when they are thrown back. Is there some sort of long-term effect on them?
What can we do to protect the populations of these poor beagle and other sharks in Irish waters?
I think really the most important thing is to get more research done on them, so get more information so that we can empower stakeholders and policymakers to have that solid information, have that science behind whatever they're trying to get through, and then provide protection for them at a governmental level.
We didn't manage to find any poor beagle sharks on this trip, but until now I didn't know they even existed, or that more than 30 different shark species roam Irish waters. But the fact that some of these sharks are critically endangered is another reminder of the conflict between some human activities and the natural world. But do all human activities have to negatively impact sea life? Is there a way to harvest food and resources from the sea that could even help ocean biodiversity? A source of food, medicine, and even compost, seaweed has long been harvested from the rocks and beaches of our shores. And in Blacksod Bay, I'm meeting a kelp farmer with a more modern take on this ancient practice.
There is no real negative impact, like, you know, from the point of view of carbon, from the point of view of producing protein without the use of land or without the use of fresh water, which is a big thing. There's no fertilizers, there's no, you know, plowing up land. All you do is you put the seed out and it grows. Like, we've got some spores that we collected from the hatchery in Bantry yesterday, and those spores, they're sprayed onto these lines here, and they put them into grow-out tanks similar to this. This is Ilaria escalente, which is wing kelp, and it's a winter species, so we will seed now in October, and we would harvest then in April. It produces protein to 10 times faster than most land plants.
Can I go out and see the lines being laid?
Yeah, we're seeding at the moment, so we can go out now and have a look.
Excellent. Thank you.
Apart from being a nutritious food, Anthony listed all the other uses for his kelp: cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, animal feed, tomato feed, and even has a license to grow asparagopsis, a seaweed that can reduce methane emissions from cattle.
So what are they doing there, Anthony?
So these are the collectors that you just saw earlier in the barrel, and they're basically putting those out to sea now on the submerged headline.
They'll hang there now right through the winter as they're growing?
Yeah, they'll hang there. They'll sink down to a depth about 1 metre below the surface, and they'll be there then for all the winter storms.
I can see one of the ropes here.
Yeah, that one is already seeded now.
Okay.
Just done that. They're on Ilaria now. Earlier we were seeding Saccharina sugar kelp on these first lines, and we've moved on to Ilaria now. Are there more collectors there, Michael? Oh, okay, sound. Up to 90% of the seaweed used in Europe is imported from Asia. You know, so this is a model I think that could be used in a lot of rural areas in Ireland, can create employment, you know, can produce food cheaply. So
Was it easy for you to get a license?
No, it took a while. From the very start, from my first, I think, meeting to the end, it was between the 6 and 7 year period. During that time, I really had no indication whether I was going to get a license or not get a license. And then just one day I got a letter in the post saying, you have an aquaculture license. But the licensing, it's cumbersome, and there's no communication until you get a determination saying yes or no. Some people are waiting for licenses for years and years. Look at, we're up and running now. This is our 4th year seeding now, so, and it's going really well.
There is such potential in this industry, a carbon neutral, possibly carbon negative source of protein, and a market worth millions. Yet the lack of modern legislation has left this industry floundering, and with it, the potential for employment and spin-off industries in hard-hit coastal communities. And from one of the oldest marine activities on the west coast to one of the newest on the east, this new directive covers a wide range of activities. But there's no doubt that one of the primary interests driving this plan is renewable energy, in particular wind energy. And at Ireland's only offshore wind farm, I'm about to find out about some ambitious plans and what the marine planning framework means for them.
What's the advantage of offshore wind versus onshore wind?
The opportunity for offshore wind is to deliver more reductions at scale.
And will the new development here will the wind turbines be a lot bigger?
So we're planning, these turbines that we're looking at here have a tip height of 124 metres, and we're looking at ones that have up to 200 metres.
So they will be a lot bigger. And what will be the energy generation in terms of how many homes will the new wind farm power?
We expect it to generate enough electricity to power over 500,000 homes, and that would then offset carbon emissions by 600,000 tonnes annually as well.
That's definitely a massive contribution to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, yes.
Ireland plans to have 80% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2030, an ambitious target that would be impossible without offshore wind.
And the new wind farm here, how long will that take to build?
Be ready to be deployed by 2025.
And are there impacts from the construction of the wind turbines on marine mammals?
So these are very significant structures, and when they're new projects that weren't there before. So we do a number of years worth of studies to understand what the environment is and what mammals are using the areas, and then we design our construction program around that. And then in terms of any issues like noise, we use mitigation measures to try and minimize any impact during the construction phase.
And Ireland has a massive marine territory. There's huge potential for renewable energy out at sea, like the wind farm that you're developing here. What do you see as the potential?
The government is committed to looking at 30 gigawatts of offshore beyond 2030. So we should be looking at the opportunity for export of that.
There is an urgent need to decarbonise our economy, whilst also ensuring harmony with nature. So what measures does the new marine planning framework offer, and what role will marine protected areas play? Whether it's fishing, aquaculture, recreation, or any number of marine activities, they all depend on healthy oceans. A crucial part of delivering this is with marine protected areas, or MPAs. Policy expert Ellen McMahon has worked on MPAs in New Zealand and the UK before returning to Ireland.
Ellen, tell me, what is a marine protected area?
So a marine protected area is essentially a geographically defined area, and it's protected through legal means for achieving stated conservation objectives, so conserving a wide range of features or habitats and species. So you have everything from, I suppose, a low level of protection where you would allow a lot of activities in an area, right up to your strictest type of protection, essentially no take zones.
Why do we need marine protected areas?
Because the ecosystem operates in kind of such a delicate way and everything is interconnected, that if you protect, for example, a fish nursery habitat, you have such a beneficial impact then on everything that relies on that. So our foraging birds, cetaceans, and then obviously as well there's a climate benefit to MPAs. Seagrass, for example, sequesters 35 times more carbon than tropical rainforests. So the climate benefits of that habitat alone are massive. And as well as that, they can really help to sustain coastal communities. So it's everything from, I suppose, improving biodiversity, improving those ecosystem services, and also providing benefits for socioeconomic reasons.
And there's a huge surge now in interest in offshore wind developments, wind farms, and that's a good thing, surely, facing into a climate crisis.
Absolutely, it is going to be a really important component of decarbonising our economy, but we need to be careful here that we're not doing it to the detriment of the biodiversity emergency. These are two interlinked emergencies that we have, so let's make sure that we get the protection right and that we're also getting it right for, decarbonising our economy.
There's so many different things going on at sea, from wind energy to fishing to seaweed aquaculture to protected areas. How do we plan for those in a spatial level?
On a European level, there is a directive and an obligation for us to develop what's known as a marine spatial plan. And basically, that's a way of analysing and deciding what activities go where in our marine environment. We have to ensure that these plans contribute to the preservation and the protection and the improvement of the marine environment. And by leaving MPAs outside of that process, which has happened in Ireland, we're not really meeting that objective of what they should be doing.
So there might be people in coastal communities who'd be worried about the mention of a marine protected areas and think that this is a place where they can't do their normal marine activities. Are there benefits for coastal communities in having marine protected areas?
So MPAs, I think they should be really viewed as a positive thing for our environment and for coastal communities. So obviously we have the biodiversity benefits and that's well documented. But there's also the benefits of the spillover effects of these areas. So for example, an abundance of fish and shellfish species outside of them, that then you can have, some levels of fishing around them, and that brings a benefit to local communities and to the fishing sector. But also, what do we stand to lose? If we don't protect these areas, we're going to see continued decline in our fish stocks. So really it's about, also restoring populations of fish species.
Would you have high hopes now that we're going to have good marine protected areas in Ireland in the next couple of years?
I do have high hopes for MPAs in Ireland in the future. So the government has committed to achieving 30% protected areas by 2030, which is brilliant. But what's crucial is that we can designate 30%, a spatial designation, quite easily. But it has to be meaningful, it has to be effective, and it has to work. So I think that's the challenge, is getting an effective 30%. But I do think we can do it. Stakeholders are getting on board. Public perception has really changed in the last number of years. We just need the political will and the resources to get there now.
I'm about to leave for another shark tagging trip, but I've just learned that the marine planning framework has now passed into law. So before I go, I want to speak with someone directly involved.
Conor, tell me about the new legislation that's coming in around governance in the marine area.
And it puts in place a new regulatory framework and legislative system for consent, licensing, planning permission in the entirety of the new maritime area. And the Act will also bring into play a new agency tailor-made for this purpose to govern and regulate the system, called the Maritime Area Regulatory Authority, or MARA for short.
We met a seaweed farmer called Anthony Irwin, and it took him something like 7 years to get a license to put out some lines for growing seaweed. Will this new system make it easier for things like seaweed farming?
That will still be licensed under the old system, the 1933 system, because it falls under aquaculture. But Minister Darragh O'Brien has gone on record in the Shannon over the last couple of weeks to say that he believes aquaculture will be coming into the new system anyway, which I think we'd welcome, given that there's a statutory limit of 30, 60, 90 days for these licence applications to be turned around by MARA.
But for the moment, they're not included?
For the moment, it's not included, but it is under review.
Okay. And then another thing that I've been learning about is marine protected areas. Are marine protected areas part of this new marine planning framework?
The good news is that following a lengthy public consultation, legislation will be coming before the Oireachtas in the first half of 2022 to define that term and to set out in law a system for designating marine protected areas. Because obviously we have very ambitious targets, we have 30% of the marine protected by 2030. There's two aspects to this. So if tomorrow we flick a switch and designated 30% as protected, my question would be, what about the other 70%? So whereas marine protected areas will look at sensitive areas and protect those, what we've done with the National Marine Planning Framework is look at the decisions and make sure that 100% of decisions taken in the maritime area, covering the entirety of the maritime area, bring rigorous environmental assessment to each of those projects.
So we'd hope to see a legal framework then in place for marine protected areas by when? By 2023?
Like, there'll be an intensive period coming up now to get that legislation in place, and the hope would be that over the next 18 months we'll see that legislation pass through the Oireachtas and that formal system of designation will then be available.
Although I'd prefer to have seen the protections in place first, I can understand the urgency of developing renewable energy. And it does seem that the issue is finally being taken seriously. This is the last day for the research team to try and tag sharks this year. This time, they're leaving from Courtmacsherry, and I'm on the way to join them.
So we're waiting to see if we catch a shark. If we do, the team are going to take blood sample, tissue sample, measure all the different dimensions of the shark. If it's a female, they might take an ultrasound to see if she's carrying pups. It's really quite exciting. I can't wait to see if we catch a shark now.
Yeah, we're just trying to, the weight of the fish, just trying to keep tension on it and slowly just try and get the head up and work it up towards the boat. Probably about 164 claims, please. Jenny or someone? Come on. Just grab the rod there for a minute. Spin around short. Turn around and get the hose.
And what exactly are you looking for today? What are you sampling for?
We're taking a number of tissue samples. We do muscle, a biopsy of the muscle. We take a clip of the fin, just a small bit of the fin cartilage. Fin clips can be used for population genetics to see who's related to who and to where in the world. And one of the most important samples that I'm collecting is blood. And all of those are going to give us information about their diet. And then in the blood, we can also do reproductive hormone analysis. Are they pregnant? Have they recently given birth? We're able to tell all of that depending on what the hormone levels are in their blood, which is really cool information to get.
Once the shark is on board, the team spring into action. They have to run a battery of tests, take blood samples and measurements, but to ensure the shark is not harmed, this all has to happen in 10 minutes.
Coming on to 10 minutes, guys.
All done? Okay, back up to the rope. Try to go. Fine fish.
What a thing to see, a really beautiful blue shark here off the coast of West Cork. It's quite something.
Seeing these beautiful animals up close was an experience I'll never forget. But it's also a reminder why we need to do more to protect our oceans. There's no reason we can't develop our ocean resources in a sustainable way. But it needs strong legislation, proper enforcement, and marine protected areas. Implementing the new marine planning framework will certainly be a step in the right direction for Ireland. The threats facing our oceans are enormous, and marine protected areas need to be central to any plans that govern their future, so that the life in them continues for its sake as well as ours.